Hi everyone, this is Matt, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk to you about potential careers for you after your PhD. So the first obvious choice is you could do a postdoc, and what happened to me at least was that after my PhD, when I was finishing my PhD, my supervisor said, "Hey Matt, I have some money, you like your research, would you like to do a little bit more of it?" And this is how I got my first postdoc, and this is how I stayed in academia, because I was just generally interested in my research and there was some money to do more, and it was an easy choice, right? So this is what I decided to do, and this is what you might potentially decide to do as well. But then after postdocing for 3 years, I left academia and I moved to industry. So industry is another potential option for you, and industry is quite wide. So first of all, you could be doing actual research and development for pharmaceutical companies, for biotechs, and also for contract research organizations, or CROs for short. So CROs do preclinical and clinical research and diagnostic research, and they do it all for other companies, for other pharma or biotech companies. So the whole idea here is that, for example, they would have a new drug and they would want to test. So for example, your supervisor would come up with a new drug and they would want to test the drug in preclinical studies on animals, or in clinical studies in humans, and then these companies would run these trials, would do this research for them. So this is one thing that these companies do. The other thing that they do is diagnostics. So I think COVID-19 is a great example. So when we were all sending our swabs for tests, so many of these tests went to contract research organizations who were testing the swabs, the samples, to see whether you were positive or not for COVID. So this is what these guys do. And you could be working in a lab there doing exactly that. However, there are also so many roles that are supporting research and development, right? So you could potentially be within regulatory affairs. So you'd be writing all of the documents needed for submissions to make sure that preclinical studies can occur, can progress to clinical studies, and then you'd be writing documents, writing the protocols, submitting the data from the trials, from the clinical studies, to regulatory health agencies like FDA in the US, or EMA in European Union. Okay, so this is what you could be doing. You could also be supporting R&D by being within business development and marketing. So business development people finding new clients. You could also be working within sales and technical support, to again bring more revenue and ensure that clients are happy. Because you understand so much about the science itself, you could be doing quality assurance or quality control, making sure that the research is done properly, as per international guidelines, standards, or working within project management, because you understand research and you like people, you're bubbly, and you're very friendly, and you can manage the research, manage what the labs are doing, and convey this information to the clients, and then be that person in between the clients and the actual people who do research for them. This is roughly what you can do in industry. However, what if you're not really interested in industry and you're not interested in academia? What else is there, right? So this is the stuff that I really want to bring to you, to show you other possibilities. So for example, if you like communication, if you like talking about science, this is another thing that you could do. So for example, you could become an editor for a journal, you can work within publishing, you can work within medical communication agencies to convey research information to various audiences, to lay public, to physicians, to nurses, pharmacists, and so on. There's so much potentially to do there. You could be working within policy making, journalism, and science outreach, and I have few friends who do work in journalism and science outreach, and they really like it. So if you like writing, if you like conveying, or maybe making videos, making websites, conveying information, scientific information in various ways to other people, you could definitely look into it. Another thing that you could do is intellectual property. So patent attorneys are actually scientists at heart, and more often than not, these people have PhDs, they understand the science, then they learn about the patent law. So unfortunately this takes a lot of studying, and you need to pass some exams. But once you pass the exams, if you're willing to do more studying, then you could become a patent attorney, and at this point clients would come to you with new exciting devices or drugs that they want to patent, and then you would listen to them, you would write down a patent, and patents are very interesting pieces of documents, because you need to really capture what the device is, what it looks like, or what the molecule is, and then describe what it is going to be for. However, the beauty of it is that you don't necessarily want to make it very strict for the client, but the client will not be able to reuse the molecule of a device for other purposes. But also you don't want to make it too broad, then you're going to stop other people from developing their own products. So patent law is extremely interesting, and it's definitely something worth pursuing if you like research, and if you like writing and finding the key information and then describing it. And then you have all of your problem solving and analyzing skills. You could use them in finance. Yes, finance is a possible option, because you can do modeling, you can do optimizing, you can do data analysis, right? So definitely you could find yourself a role within finance. And then there are various roles within IT, data science, software development, user research. A lot of these guys that do these jobs have PhDs in IT related fields, or for user research also in psychology, because you need to understand what the client is potentially looking for, what they need, and then you will guide how the software, the websites are going to be designed so they're user friendly. But you know what, you don't really have to be maybe with IT background or have psychology background. I actually have a friend who studied molecular biology, and she is now in user research, and she loves it. So if you're that kind of a person, but you learn quickly, and you can intuitively get what clients might want, and you can analyze the data, scrutinize it, and then find the key points and translate them into how websites should be formed, then this could be something for you as well. Then another option for you could be going to public sector. Okay, so these are the governments, the local councils, civil service in the UK, all over smaller governing bodies. So I have few friends who work for civil service in the UK. So these are local governments, and again, they do so much data analysis, and this is quite cool, because for example, if you're looking at traffic, or we're looking at consumer needs, and then consumer spendings, and then based on this, we are trying to form inform policy making, what we should do with the cities, how we should develop our communities to make them more friendly and make them more efficient. So we're getting lots of data. This is not strictly scientific data, because it's more about what people actually do, what people might need, and then translating this information into building, recreating our cities to make them better for people. I also have few friends who work for governments. So they usually started within local governments, and they went up, and they are a bit higher up, but they're still doing the same things. So we're looking at, for example, again, let's say traffic data is a good example, but on a national level. And now we are thinking about, how to optimize our motorways. Or we're looking at waste or pollution data and thinking what to do to reduce these. So there's so much potential you could do, simply because you have all the experience with data analysis, you have a very scientific mind, and you can do this. And speaking of data analysis, you could also go and work for private companies as a business analyst, as a data analyst, right? Of course you have data science, but you also have data analysis. and these are guys who do who look through data within consultancy firms. So for example, you work for a consultancy company, and they have a client that they're wondering whether this new drug or this new product could be sold in this new market, or how much it should be priced for. Is there demand for doing this or not? And now you'll be doing all of the research to find out whether it's worth doing or not, and then writing a report, bringing it back to the client. Then you have roles within NHS. So NHS is the National Health Service in the UK, and wherever you are based, I'm sure there is a health service that you could become a part of. Within NHS, when these people do their procedures, they also need scientists. So for example, a lot of blood departments will need scientists to check, to diagnose whether there is anything in the blood, if there are any biomarkers or not. Then the same within all the IVF departments, where they make sure whether people are fertile or not, and do all of the embryology related work, fertilization related work. There's so much stuff there to do. Then we moved into targeted medicine era, or at least we're starting genotyping, sequencing, patient biopsies, and then someone needs to analyze this data, make sure that it is clean, it's robust, it's reliable, find anything that is important there, and write a report and give this information to a clinician who will later convey this information to the patient. So this is also something that you could potentially do for a health service, for a national health service. We have so many companies out there and charities that depend on research funding, right? Or any funding. And you might have written grants. At least you know how to analyze data and find the key aspects of the data, and then how to sell them. So many funding bodies and so many companies need people that will either write grants or will analyze the grants to find the merit and whether they're worth pursuing. And then from there you can also work for charities. So for example, I used to work when I was a PhD student for a charity called the Brilliant Club. Recently, one of my friends who was a principal investigator moved to a charity, and now she is managing research for a charity, and she's employing people, other PhDs who were not principal investigators, who just finished their PhDs or postdocs, to help her with designing research, to scrutinizing what they need to do, analyzing all of this. So there's definitely a lot of scope for you to do within third sector as well. And then finally you have non-academic roles within universities. Again, universities write grants, so this is something for you potentially to do, to write grants for universities, to do research admin jobs, and also to work within research support. So we have lots of technicians, we have lots of lab support staff, and this is also potentially something that you could pursue. So all in all, there are quite a lot of options beyond academia and industry. There's intellectual property, there's communication science, all the medical agencies. You could work in third sector, you could work for the government. There is so much for you to do. Also finances, of course, IT. So have a think, research these options, and please, if you enjoy this content, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.